Hey, today we're speaking with the founder of Araiya Hotels and Resorts, Amruda Nair, for International Women's Day 2022. We're delighted to have you and would love to ask you a few questions about being a woman in the industry. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Thanks, Karen. My pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So my first question is, what is the most sexist thing you might have heard from like a senior or colleagues or guests?
I think it's one of those. It's not a single sort of alarming statement that's made. I think people are much smarter than that. But it's always sort of like, oh, you're gonna do that, or oh, it's your business. It's a very subtle sort of thing that comes in the form of a question, and it's usually around your capabilities. I find that as a woman, you're asked to prove yourself. It takes a while for that acceptance to come in, and I'm amused by it because physically I'm a sports person, so I'm physically capable of doing a lot more than most men are. And here I am having to prove myself on a woman seated across the table. So I try and let it be amused by it instead of letting it annoy me.
Is this something that you think has gotten better over the years or worse over the years?
So honestly, I've never felt that in my own family environment. Nairs are traditionally we're a matriarchal society, and I think my grandfather always had strong women around him. Even on our listed company, that since '84 we've had independent female directors. So way before it was mandated by law. Even now, I think we've got 3 on the current board. So I think there's always been a presence in that sense. My grandfather named his businesses after his wife. So so I think in a lot of ways, in my own sort of sheltered environment, there was never really that sense of inequality. And I think for me, and even now, I think I feel it when I'm going out of my comfort zone. But that said, I've 3 years ago I launched a business in Saudi Arabia, and I was and we opened a 611 room property there. So I think so I think I've been fortunate that it's not an everyday sort of occurrence, but as an entrepreneur, you put yourself out and you're meeting new people and entering new markets all the time, and therefore it's inevitable. But no, I think it depends on the generation you're dealing with, the country you're in, and all of these things. But again, I've been fortunate so far.
Right. Do you think that in your observation, the industry has gotten easier for women, both in leadership positions and people who are trying to enter and make it as chefs or hoteliers?
Yes. No, so I think it has gotten easier, and I think that the positions we struggle in are actually in the middle management. So we do have quite a solid presence of female candidates at the entry levels in hotel schools. I think it's considered sort of glamorous enough for people to want to be in it. And certainly on the leadership, you do have a big presence, especially on the ownership side, and that so I think I've seen that right through my career, not just in India, but in Southeast Asia, in Europe. Lots of women leading the real estate side of the hotel business. But I think the struggle is in the middle management, and I think that has us to do with the misconception about the working hours and having to work weekends and having to work night shifts, and people only think about the operational side of the business, whereas I think there's lots more to it and lots more options available that people don't consider.
Right. Okay. So what is the most interesting aspect of the industry that you work in?
So for me, the most interesting part has always been sort of the new developments. Trying to see where the upcoming destinations are and what you can build design-wise, and that represents sort of the place and the culture, and bring in those kinds of textures and colors and those kinds of things. So I think for me, that's the most interesting part in terms of what I look forward to on a daily basis.
Right. And conversely, what are the challenges?
I think the current challenge is to deal with volatility. One thing that the pandemic has taught us is that you have to learn how to stay lean. And traditionally in our businesses, it's very capex heavy. So it's the real estate part and the asset, and building out these heavy assets, and then you add on almost 40% of your P&L is payroll. So it's people intensive also. So I think that what the pandemic has I think it's been around for a while, but I think what the pandemic has accelerated is the need to look at how we can use the digital systems to replace some of the more manual processes, and still have people on the foreground, but let the human element be more about engagement and communication and the real hospitality side of things, and use digitization to help you free people from that administrative task.
Okay. So are there any particular lessons that you can speak of that you've learned along the way?
So I think for me, in my career path, now I'm on my 12th country, I think. So in my career path, what I've learned is that you have to be willing to learn and grow and move. So I think every time that I found myself stuck in a role and trying to hold on to it, I wasn't facilitating change. And I think change is something that people learn is inevitable. And if you see movement as a way to grow and learn, I think you'll go further and faster.
Okay. And if not doing what you were doing right now, what would you have done instead?
So I've always had a love for literature in some form. So I even when I was doing an economics degree for my undergrad. In my undergrad, I went off to England and went to the London School of Journalism and did a summer writing program. So and I used to write for on a freelance basis when I was younger, and I continued to do that. I published a hotel magazine. I continued to write a blog for Araiya. So I dabble in it, but not as much as I would have. I think I would like to. And so I think I do something that was maybe more academic, and or something to do with literature and writing and or publishing in those lines.
Is this something that you think you can find time to explore now, or maybe a few years down the line?
So I think it's something that I try and do as more of a sort of a relief in my days, like doing something that I enjoy that's related to hospitality. I think it might be interesting to explore sort of the creative process that's not work related. So that's something seems to be interesting as just a stress buster, I think.
Right. Okay. So is there any interesting, funny anecdote that has stood out to you during your years of work?
But going back to what I was saying about development being the most fun and interesting aspect, the one story I remember, I came back after having worked in Southeast Asia, and I was in the resort market. So went to Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia and Thailand, where a lot of resort development was taking place in those years. I came back to India thinking that that I've seen it all. And I remember going on a site visit to my father, and we were looking at a land parcel from which you are meant to be able to see views of the Taj. And the gentleman who was there to show us the piece of land said, "Oh, and you could have a view of the monument right from the lobby, and the lobby would have been, on the first floor."
Right,
And
right.
my father saying, "Oh, but I can't really get a sense of it from where we're standing." And he said, "Okay, yeah, no problem. Go for lunch and come back, and
Right.
I'll show you the Taj." And we just laughed it off and went off.
Right, right.
Came back, and believe it or not, he built this steel contraption, which
Right.
was like a little, lift capsule. Obviously, that had been put together just in the hour that we were away. And the
Right.
top of it connected with a steel cord over a tree, and there was a tractor at the other end. And literally, you had the tractor go up on one end, and my father and I went up this steel contraption on.
Oh God.
And we went up 2 floors.
Right.
So many years later, I remember being in Qatar, talking to a potential buyer, showing him this piece of land, and the picture we showed him of the view of the Taj was the one that I'd taken off it.
Oh wow.
So I think these it's funny how these strange
Right.
memories stick with you.
Yeah, but it sounds really risky.
Yeah.
But wow, I mean, talk about like
It was done.
dedication to your job. So, okay. Also, so what is your advice to women entering the industry right now, especially looking at leadership or entrepreneurial roles?
Well, I would say that don't be put off by what you see up front in terms of the operations, and say, "Oh, I don't think my family or with my other commitments, I'll be able to manage the hours and the and the weekends." And people tend to think that they're busiest on the holidays is when they're busiest, which is true, but that's only relevant if you're looking at operations, and a lot of people enjoy that, being on the floor. I've spent my last 3 New Years before the pandemic, on the floor, because it's fun. It's fun to be a part of it. But I think what people forget is that there's so much on the corporate side also, like you said, in terms of management roles. You've got the real estate and finance bit, which I love. You've got the asset management side of it. You've got the sales and marketing, the branding, the social media. There's HR, which is a huge component, such a critical piece to what we do. And revenue management to it, right? In terms of and all these are corporate roles. So I think that people don't realize how many options there are within the business.
Right. And the last thing, what is one thing that people should know about the industry that you work in that they don't already, of course?
Well, they know that it's glamorous, but I don't know how I don't think it's as glamorous when you're working, as part of sort of the back of the stage, trying to make the whole production work. So I think it's great, but in a country like India, hotels is always or hotels, restaurants, the entire industry is always pegged as this luxury product, and that's not necessarily true. The first point is that a lot goes into doing that, and all of that is not glamorous, right? To get to that end product.
Yeah.
And the second point I'd like to make is that so much of it, comes down to people, and the industry has such a tremendous potential in terms of employment generation. I mean, if you just think about how a hotel functions, the number of people that go into it, the whole ecosystem around. In India, it contributes to 9% of the employment, in the country. So I'm talking, the guides, the taxis, the whole ecosystem that goes along with the industry. And I think that while yes, there are certain aspects of it that cater to luxury, that's such a small portion of it. There's a lot of misconception there also.
Okay, I think that's about it. Thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure.